In the modern day, many experts and enthusiasts still travel back to a time shrouded in darkness as they search for answers to the most enduring enigmas. It's through these efforts that the secrets in the shadows of history can finally be illuminated. Number 10. It was the 8th of July in 1904 when Captain Lusher boarded the 1393-ton single-screw steamer, the SS Nemesis. Lusher would guide the iron hull from Newcastle to Melbourne with a hold full of coal. The ship was built in 1881 with the focus being on coal transportation. 9 years later, though, it operated as a passenger carrier until the last years of the century, when the Nemesis began transporting coal again. With the ability to reach speeds up to 12 knots, the vessel departed the port, but almost immediately, disaster would strike. Just as the vessel departed the land, it was overrun with a southerly gale. The SS Marleau had spotted the struggling ship off the coast of Wollongong. At some point, it seemed as though the Nemesis had become turned around and was heading back towards Sydney, a claim verified through a report of a vessel in distress spotted off Port Hacking that evening. Rockets had also been sighted nearby, and not long after, wreckage began to litter Cronulla Beach. There were 32 crew members aboard, and all of them were now gone. A piece of the Nemesis steering wheel washed ashore, and not long after, the bodies began to appear, some of which were unidentifiable. It was an unexpected maritime tragedy, one that would leave behind a long-standing mystery. Even though shrapnel was discovered, the Nemesis wreck was not. The location of its final resting place was a secret that only the sea would know. Despite searching for the vessel, it was never found. Stories of the missing shipwreck would be passed from generation to generation until it was lost to the times. Then, unexpectedly, 120 years later, the tale of the SS Nemesis re-emerged. The first revelation was made in 2021 when ROV footage revealed features of the midships and bow sections of an unidentified vessel off the coast of Wollongong. The discovery was internally known as the Unidentified Wreck off Wollongong at Heritage NSW and was officially reported in May of 2022 by Ed Korber of the Subsea Professional Marine Service as an unidentified vessel. The two organizations combined as they made their first attempts to inspect the site. They were attempting to establish the location, height, depth, and extent of the debris site. These questions were finally established in July and August of 2023. It was that year that the research team, with CSIRO, Australia's National Science Agency, and Heritage NSW had set out on another voyage to the site and retrieved the drop camera that gave further details about the wreckage. In October, a report was undertaken by the research companies and was designed to provide indications that would confirm whether this was the SS Nemesis or not. The report would list mostly visual identifications of the site features, and they correlated with the existing pictures and descriptions of the 120-year missing ship. Through comparison and considerations, archaeological evidence and historical documentation, it was finally confirmed. The unidentified wreck off Wollongong was the missing SS Nemesis that sank all the way back in 1904. Number 9. The Mona Lisa is the most mysterious oil painting known to history. Who is she? Where is the landscape that emerges in the background? What is the nature of her smile? And how did she get that scar on her lower lip? The questions surrounding the painting continue to abound, but experts in the art field are slowly beginning to unravel the mystery of the Mona Lisa. The half-body portrait of a woman was painted by Leonardo da Vinci, one of the most revered artists not only of his time, but of ours too. The wood panel oil painting now hangs in the Louvre Museum in Paris, where it's become an object of pilgrimage. As the questions begin to pile up, independent researchers began trying to solve the enigmas in recent years. One such researcher is geologist and art historian M. Pizzarusso, whose main focus was on only one of the questions: where was the Mona Lisa painted? After studying the rock formations in the background of the painting and the body of water, she reached a conclusion. The formations allude to Lecco, a small town located in northern Italy. The body of water, she deduced, is Lake Garlette, and the bridge above the subject's shoulder is the Ozone Visconti. The rock formations match the limestone rocks that can be found in Lecco. While this aspect of the painting has been solved, it isn't the background that has viewers scratching their heads. What they really want to know is who she is. Many theories have come into play over the years, but none of them have truly stuck. Some suggested that the painting was a self-portrait, claiming that Da Vinci had disguised himself in a dress and wig. Theorists point to facial recognition software and analysis that suggest that the eyes and mouth of both subjects share some similarities. Isabella of Aragon, Duchess of Milan, was the next subject. It's known that the famous artist had spent much of his time in Milan, making many wonder if there was a missed connection. Others have suggested that the subject could be Da Vinci's mother, Caterina, or that the Mona Lisa is simply a combination of various subjects all put into one. Given our advancements in modern times, these ideas can finally be put to rest. It was only a guess that Lisa Gherardini was the model for the Mona Lisa. She was the wife of a wealthy Florentine merchant named Francesco del Giocondo. A break in the case, though, wouldn't come until 2005. That year, German academics uncovered something truly remarkable. Dr. Armin Schlechter, a manuscript expert at Heidelberg University, came across a book with scribbles jotted down in its margin. The scribbles were made by the owner back in 1503, and they list the identity of the most famous portraits in the world. Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa is, in fact, Lisa Gherardini. The discovery was a breakthrough and the earliest mentioned link between the merchant's wife and the portrait. But there are notes by an Italian official named Giorgio Vasari, who back in 1550 also made the link, but his theory was discounted since historians believed his version of events was unreliable. Further adding to this solution is the alternative name given to the Mona Lisa, which is La Gioconda, meaning happy or joyful woman in Italian, a phrase that also hints at the woman's married name. Just like that, another Mona Lisa mystery was solved, and now more are beginning to unravel. Number 8. It was 2 years into the Second World War when the 5 Sullivan brothers decided to enlist in the Navy. Francis and George had already served and were discharged in 1941, but a month after the Pearl Harbor attack, they decided that America still required their services. The only condition to their re-enlisting was that all 5 would be allowed to serve together. Somehow they managed to convince the officials to allow them to do this, despite the Navy forbidding relatives from serving on the same ship. George, Frank, Joseph, Madison, and Albert, though, wouldn't have served at all if they weren't allowed to go together. A month after enlisting, the USS Juno would be brought into service. The Atlanta-class light cruiser was commissioned at Kearney, New Jersey. After a shakedown period, the vessel was then sent to blockade French naval units from vacating Guadalupe Island. In August, it relocated and served in another campaign before joining Task Force 17 and assisting Task Force 61. It was on that mission that Juno would bear witness to the sinking of the USS Wasp, knowing that it was destined to a similar fate. It was this ship that the Waterloo brothers would board and serve on together. In November of 1942, the Juno and the crew would serve as anti-aircraft support. It was that month that the naval battle of Guadalcanal would commence. The light cruiser had been torpedoed and tried to make it to safety. Later that morning, though, while off the coast of San Cristobal Island, the Juno was torpedoed again by a Japanese submarine. This time it exploded and the ship sank. Several days had passed with only 10 survivors of 140 men being rescued, but the Sullivan brothers were not among them. As a result of the loss, the Navy again barred close relatives from serving together. Despite the rescue operations and search efforts, the Juno and the remaining bodies remained missing. Thomas Sullivan and his wife held out hope that their boys would be discovered. Official news stated that they were missing in action. Then, on the 12th of January, 1943, the condolences from the Navy were finally issued. As the years trotted on, the location of the vessel and the story of the Sullivans faded into obscurity. Where the wreckage even was remained unknown for decades, and it wasn't until 2018 that a revelation would be made. It had been 76 years since the ship had swiftly sunk to the ocean floor, resting there undiscovered. It was March when an expedition, funded by billionaire and philanthropist Paul Allen, headed out into the open sea. They were in the vicinity of the Solomon Islands in an area known as the Iron Bottom Sound, due to its abundance of wreckage. After being alerted to an underwater anomaly, the research team made use of sonar equipment and a remotely operated submersible and began to map the seafloor. Video footage allowed them to spot what appeared to be a long-lost warship, the USS Juno. Submerged at a depth of 3,700 feet, the vessel had already become a crumbling ruin, now teeming with sea life. Through further investigation, the identity of the ship was confirmed, and the mystery of the Sullivan brothers could finally be put to rest. Number 7. All Well With Me was a single sentence written onto a sheet of paper. It was dated as the 30th of June in 1916, with the name Harold hastily scribbled beneath. Upon its discovery, researchers had to carefully unfold the brittle paper that had been stained by age, and inside they would discover the annotations, accompanied by a delicate flower that was now brown with decay but still intact. It didn't take historians long to find out who the writer was and what the letter was meant for, but the mystery of the flower endured. Experts were able to determine the enigmatic one-liner was written by Harold Wrong, a graduate of the University of Toronto. He'd been studying at Oxford University when the First World War rolled around. He would enlist in the Lancashire Fusiliers and would find himself in France. It was this letter that he would mail to his brother Murray from his post at Somme. The note was his last letter home, and his family never heard from him again. This was because the following day, on the 1st of July, the Battle of Somme would begin. It was a tragic fight, one that saw an immense loss of life. More than 24,000 Canadians had lost their lives, and Harold had been spotted going over the trenches, clutching his wounded arm, never to be seen or heard from again. His final note to Murray would become the only reminder of him. His family would receive the note and plucked flower only days later. While the mystery of the message and its writer had quickly been solved, the type of flower that accompanied the note was a mystery. The identity of the Somme flower began to attract much attention and fascination. Many had tried and failed to figure out what it was, and so the mystery endured. For years, scientists and biologists conducted delicate studies on the preserved flower. They even went to the battlefield, hoping to find a trace of another one there, but they never did. Some enthusiasts and experts, though, wouldn't let the mystery go unanswered. So in 2024, Laurel MacDonald, the Associate Chief Librarian for Special Collections, turned to a new team who were based in the Fisher Library. It was this place that was host to a small team that had a scanning system known as Misha that was used to photograph rare articles. These scans would ultimately reveal new details and data on previously mysterious artifacts or documentation. This is exactly the method used with the Somme flower. The scan allowed researchers to get a better look at the blooms and the stem, but MacDonald knew that uncovering the identity of the flower would go beyond just scanning it, and she soon found herself heading down a research rabbit hole. She soon enlisted the aid of scholars, archivists, and botanists in her effort to figure out exactly what this plant was. The true revelation, though, would only come when the team made contact with the former director of the Royal Botanic Garden, who had documentation on the plants present on the battlefield. While no matches turned up, something else was revealed. There was an immense amount of varying plants present in Somme. The head of research at the Old Books New Science Lab, Jessica Lockhart, was also involved in this mystery. After reviewing the images and documentation of the battlefield, she decided to consult a colleague who was an expert on flora and fauna. The proposition was that this was a blue cowslip. This was only a theory, but after turning to plant.net, the 100-year-old flower mystery was finally put to rest. Harold Wrong had picked up the bloom of the spring, the blue cowslip. Experts suggest that he was attracted to it because it was still in bloom during late June, when other plants had already vanished. The century-old mystery of what flower Harold had sent home was finally solved. Number 6. It's often the case that renovations, cleaning up old buildings, or tearing them down reveal some interesting finds. Artifacts like fossils and ancient jewelry occasionally turn up, sparking new mysteries. Such was the case in April of 2022 during the renovations that were taking place at the Holy Trinity Church in Sunderland. During reconstruction, a workman came across a strange note. The scribbles littered the back of a sermon that was stuffed down the back of a church pew, where it lay hidden from the public eye. It was stained and covered in dust and dirt, only hinting at its potential aid. The letter read, "Dear friend, whoever finds this paper thinks of William Elliot, who had 2 months and 2 weeks and 4 days on the 11th of August, 1897. Whoever you are that finds this paper, don't tear it up or throw it away. Keep it in remembrance of me. I was the leading boy of this choir. I love you if you love me." The pencil-written note prompted the questions. Who was William Elliot, and what became of him? Naturally, the curious note attracted a lot of attention. Researchers needed to figure out who William was and quickly began analyzing the script. To unravel this alluring mystery, researchers began looking into the history of the church, once known as Sunderland Parish Church, a building that had a connection to the nearby orphanage. They then began looking into the name pinned on the note and if it had any connections to that orphanage. It turned out it did. William Elliot was the son of Chief Officer Thomas Duncan Elliot, a seafarer who was sailing the Scariest when he tragically was washed overboard in 1887 when William was a toddler. After being placed in the Sunderland Orphan Asylum, he became the leading boy of the parish choir. But the note was written with fear and anxiety because William was approaching the age where he'd be discharged from the orphanage and forced to fend for himself in the open world. So whatever became of him? Family history researchers took on the case and began tracking down the chorister through several documents and even census records. Through these efforts, the mystery of William Elliot began to unravel. The leading boy was one of 50 orphaned sons of seafaring men who lived in that very orphanage. His mother, Sarah, was a widow left with 4 children who had to make ends meet by working as a dressmaker. After 5 years of being in the system, William's life would take an unexpected turn. He had no reason to be filled with such fear because when he stepped foot out into the world, he would find himself in an honorable career. While still young, he decided to move from England to America, where he'd be established as a naturalized United States citizen. He also opted to follow in his father's footsteps and began a life at sea as a U.S. Navy official. While the details of his Navy career were vague, a retirement announcement revealed he had progressed to commander just before his 1945 retirement after 40 years of service. Number 5. The MV Noonga was a large freighter that ran for Australia. Its directive was to transport steel between various ports along the coast. The 25th of August in 1969, though, would be its final voyage. The Noonga would set sail from Newcastle with 26 men aboard and a cargo hold full of steel, heading for Townsville. But as they were well off the coast, the ship would encounter poor weather and rough seas near Smoky Cape. The wind was howling at 70 knots, with waves reaching 30 feet. Any efforts to steer the vessel to safety proved futile, and soon it began to sink. When the crew realized that it was no use, they began to jump ship. 2 men climbed on a life raft and escaped, while another 3 were found clinging to a piece of debris. These 5 men were the only survivors. Noonga sank, taking 21 lives down with it. The search of the wreckage and the crew was one of the largest and greatest efforts in Australia's history. The efforts made use of 5 destroyers, 3 minesweepers, 7 aircraft, several oceanic vessels, and 2 helicopters, all to no avail. The crew and the wreck were gone. Described as Australia's worst peacetime maritime disaster, the Noonga would go down in history. But now, 55 years after it disappeared, the mystery of another missing ship has finally been solved. Through renewed efforts to solve historical oceanic mysteries, a research team with CSIRO, in collaboration with New South Wales, began investigating through a piggyback project. They started mapping the area where the ship was last sighted, making use of underwater vessels and high-resolution seafloor mapping. The vessel, the RV Investigator, was used to search for the missing ship in 2024, and soon they stumbled across an unidentified vessel sitting upright 170 meters below the surface. After analyzing the video footage gathered from the site, they began to compare the features of the Noonga. The dimensions were a fit for the missing freighter, and its profile matched perfectly. The team deployed the same methods as they had when discovering the Blythe Star wreck just 1 year earlier. After sending more research teams to the site, the vessel was found to be largely intact. Close-up dive teams were also deployed to confirm the identity. They concluded that the wreck was definitely the missing Nunya. The discovery marked a crucial closing for one of Australia's most tragic maritime mysteries. Not only is the discovery of the missing vessel important for the families of the crew members, but it also gives us an opportunity to understand the mystery behind the sinking and what the crew encountered aboard. Number 4. In April of 1942, the Mark III landing craft tank, LCT-326, was launched from its Middleborough home. It was designed to land armored vehicles during marine operations. The LCT-326 found itself engaged during the Second World War, serving as a landing craft. In late January of the following year, the ship would set sail from Scotland, bound for Devon, England. It was part of an accompanying fleet that would soon encounter some trouble. It was the dead of winter, and the waters were choppy. The waves were much too unpredictable and strong for the vessels to withstand. Tragedy was inbound. As the fleets passed by the Isle of Man, in the light of the 1st of February, weather conditions began to improve. HMS Cotillion had checked in on the fleet and noted that all the ships were in operation, but that was the last time that LCT-326 was seen. That evening, the vessel enigmatically vanished and was recorded as having last been seen near Bardsey Island. But the Admiralty listed the location as the Isle of Man, listing the cause of the loss as a collision with a mine or a run-in with poor weather. The LCT-326 was gone, along with the 14 men aboard, some of which were from Scotland, others from Yorkshire, Manchester, and Bristol. For years, historians and maritime mystery enthusiasts have tried to locate the missing ship, but to no avail. There was no debris washing ashore, no bodies, and no sightings. For years, the final resting place of the landing craft tank remained a mystery. It was until recent years when a revelation was finally made. While most researchers had previously been searching the coastal waters of the Isle of Man, new enthusiasts turned their attention to the route that the fleet was taking and ended up searching the area of Bardsey Island, a tiny strip of land off the coast of Wales. The area would be 100 miles away from where the Admiralty had listed the site and 25 miles from the vessel's last recorded position. With new research and advanced equipment, the teams began to search the route where they would discover an unidentified wreck site. In 2019, a team from Bangor University in North Wales made use of sonar and the research vessel Prince Mad Dog. The data revealed that the ship was 58 meters long if put back together and 10 meters wide. These measurements were almost a match for the LCT. But the thing is, it was one of 300 sites in Welsh waters that were surveyed by Prince Mad Dog, whose aim was to identify offshore wrecks and put an end to long-standing maritime mysteries. So how could they be certain that this was the LCT-326? After further analysis and research that bled into 2020, some prominent features began to pop up. These key features were reminiscent of the missing war vessel. The landing gangway and the deckhouse were a perfect fit for the ship. Soon, the team was able to come to a conclusion. Standing upright on the seafloor, chopped in half, is the LCT-326. With new data, it's now believed that the ship encountered heavy seas and broke in half forward of the bridge. Number 3. It was the 4th of February in 1986 when Mike Minquez, a Terminex pest exterminator, found himself in the attic of a home in Raleigh, North Carolina. He was spraying for bugs in the home of an elderly woman when something in the corner caught his attention. It was a laundry bag overflowing with letters. Upon closer inspection, Mike made a shocking discovery. It was a duffel bag filled with hundreds of unopened letters that had been written by soldiers more than 40 years earlier amid the Second World War. An insignia across the letters made him even more curious. The V symbol was unknown to Mike, and he'd never heard of something called V-mail before. It turned out it was a military service known as Victory Mail. It was the only link between the soldiers in battle and their families back home. The service was established in June of 1942, allowing servicemen free airmail privileges. Some of them would return from the war, but others would not, leaving families wondering about what happened to their brothers, fathers, and sons. Letters that arrived at the homes would become a keepsake of a lost love. But what were hundreds of letters from different soldiers doing in a duffel bag in the attic of an elderly lady's home? This is the question that Mike desperately needed answers to. and he immediately got on the case. He spoke with his client and discovered that the bag had been stashed there by her nephew. He'd been a crew member aboard the SS Caleb Strong with another 92 soldiers. The vessel departed from Newport, Virginia in May of 1944. It will be traveling to Algeria in Africa. During the trip, 92 men began writing their letters to their families before arriving at their destination. Each unopened piece of writing was placed in a bag, and the nephew was given the duty to deliver it via V-mail. Vowing to do this, he returned to the United States. He'd been home for weeks and then months, and soon realized his grave mistake. He'd forgotten to mail the letters. Embarrassed by his blunder, the nephew took the letters into the attic of his aunt's house, where they would then be left untouched until 1986. The woman, too, was afraid to retrieve them and mail them to the families. It was a shameful act on her nephew's part, so she opted not to say a word about them. Mike convinced his client to give him the letters, thought that the families deserved to finally hear from their lost servicemen, but he soon discovered that this was significantly harder than he thought. It had been more than 40 years, and tracking down the family members of soldiers was a troublesome task. So he made contact with Washington, D.C.'s United States Postal Service. At first, the man was hesitant to hand over the letters, fearing that they would simply be thrown away or end up in the dead letter office. But the office assured him that they would try their best to deliver them. The bag of hundreds of letters was sent to Postmaster Ross Garlusky, who sent them to Meg Harris, a media relations officer. Since the law prohibited the opening of letters by relation officers, Meg was forced to determine the location, address, and family merely by looking at the information on the front of the envelopes. 92 soldiers, letters to 150 friends and family, 117 addresses in 34 states. It was a massive operation, but as soon as possible, the letters were being sent. Sadly, by the time the letters were being distributed, many soldiers had already passed away. One was Private Roland Pooler, who'd written several letters home, but his widow would never receive any of them. In October of 1986, she would finally get her hands on the letters, which overwhelmed her with emotions upon reading them. This would regularly be the case, as the letters found their way into the hands of relatives and friends. By the end of the year, though, there were still some letters that hadn't been delivered. 3 soldiers' families couldn't be located. Still, Meg and her associates persisted, and in the spring of 1988, they contacted the president of the 781st Bombardment Squadron Association, James Altoff, and enlisted his aid in tracking down the final 3 soldiers. They were John Thomas, Morris Johnson, and C.F. Smith. And finally, after more than 40 years, all the letters found their way home, despite the difficulty in tracking down the families of the remaining men. The mystery of the hidden duffel bag letters was solved, and families now have closure. Number 2. It's often the case that some mysteries are deemed unsolvable. But with new technologies and dedicated researchers, enthusiasts, and sleuths, these uncrackable enigmas can finally be put to rest. This was true in the case of yet another World War mystery, one concerning a missing soldier. The First World War saw an unimaginable level of pure carnage. During this strenuous time, many soldiers would lose their lives or simply disappear, with their passings never being confirmed. Families were left distraught, wondering about the fate of their missing loved ones. In the early hours of the 18th of July, back in 1918, the Franco-American counteroffensive against the Germans began. It would take place in northern France, and the German forces were eventually driven back. But this didn't come without significant loss. By the end of it, more than 1,000 United States soldiers were missing, their fate unknown, leaving behind an enduring mystery. 85 years later, though, in 2004, French archaeologists began some salvage work ahead of an upcoming construction job when they stumbled upon the center of the very battlefield where many soldiers lost their lives. It was here that they would uncover the remains of 2 American soldiers. Forensic teams transported the remains to secure facilities and began their efforts to identify them. The remains would then be turned over to the U.S. military's identification laboratory, where forensic archaeologist Jay Silverstein was working. The first of the unidentified remains were quickly solved due to the embossed wallet found with the body. They belonged to Private Francis Lupo, and 2 years later, he would be laid to rest with full military honors. But the second set of remains remained enigmatic as the day they were found. The individual was only known as CIL 2004-101-I02, and he was deemed impossible to identify. It was an unsolvable mystery, one that would never be cracked, or so they thought. While it took many more years, 14 to be exact, the mystery of the codename remains was finally solved. The 100th anniversary of the soldier's passing was quickly approaching, and Silverstein was determined to solve this mystery. But he could only undertake the effort during non-working hours, but felt that if he looked at various factors, he might be able to whittle away at other possibilities. Doing this was not as easy as it sounded. His investigation began with an aspect that was already known the day the individual passed away. It seemed that his demise was on the same day as Lupo's, and Lupo had met his end on the 21st of July in 1918 during the battle. From there, the expert would use military maps, triangulate the regiments of the area, and narrow it down to hundreds upon hundreds of MIAs. Now, Silverstein was forced to take another look into the items that the body was buried with, one of which was his uniform, which bore 2 buttons. One had the letters WA on it, and the other had a 2 and a D. The expert managed to figure out that this meant IO2, and that the individual was a member of the Washington State National Guard, 2nd Regiment, Company D. This, accompanied by a medal, allowed him to narrow things down to just 4 missing men. After obtaining the information on those 4 men, Silverstein began to piece everything together and compare it to his subject. After comparing the height and dental record to his 4 guesses, he was able to determine that the remains belonged to Private First Class Charles McAllister. The final step in the closure would be determining if his theory was right. Silverstein made contact with Beverly Dillon. Dillon is the great niece of McAllister, and using mitochondrial DNA, it was finally confirmed that this was Charles McAllister. Number 1. Roger Williams was born in London, England, and passed away in Rhode Island. He was an English colonist and founder of the colony of Rhode Island. Little did anyone know at the time, but it would be this man who sparked a lengthy mystery that would only be solved in the modern era, even though it began in the 1800s. Upon his passing, Williams had left behind a colonial-era book, one that was host to an enduring mystery. Written in the margins of this book were coded, handwritten essays that no one was able to read. Since 1817, many have tried and failed to crack the coded message in the margins. Clusters of curious foreign characters lead to this enduring mystery. Williams, though, was unaware that modern society had bred a civilization of mystery solvers, codebreakers, and amateur student sleuths, backed by a world of knowledge. In the early 2000s, Brown University students discovered a small leather book in the corner of the library. It was coated in dust and attracted very little attention. Its author was at first unknown. Inside were missing pages and symbols filling each margin. It looked like a combination of Greek, Hebrew, and invented characters. When the team of students began to study the book more thoroughly, they would discover a note attached to it. It claimed that the margins had been filled with shorthand characters, names, places, and dates. It then also signed Williams's name at the end, answering only one of the mysteries. But the book fell into obscurity once more until it was brought up during a lecture in 2010 by Ted Widmer, director of Brown's John Carter Brown Library. A member of the library's board, Bill Twaddle, attended the lecture and became immersed in the enigma. Soon he, Widmer, and the manuscript librarian Kim Nusko began trying to solve the coded writing. When they discovered that their new and improved computers couldn't decipher the messy writing and determined that cracking the code manually would be incredibly difficult, they decided to give Brown's undergrads a shot. So in the fall of 2011, 2 juniors accompanied by 2 seniors got on the case. They signed up to tackle the enigma during their spring semester, but one of them, Lucas Mason Brown, opted to get a head start. He'd been studying mathematics and had taken a keen interest in cryptography. So he began with the most basic of techniques, frequency analysis, which relies on statistical truths, such as E being the most common letter used. After some time, though, the enigma persisted, and the student turned to a more sophisticated technique. Mason Brown then turned to early books on shorthand writing, and then he found himself looking into longhand codes too. Applying these 2 techniques together, he soon discovered that the code was making use of the Willis system. By using this, the student was able to make a key, and by applying the key to the first paragraph of the first essay, the first bit of tangible English emerged. After further trial and error, this time with the aid of the other undergrads, they began to decipher more and more of the cryptic text, some of which even made use of pictograms that they were forced to figure out amidst the longhand and shorthand symbols. There were 3 separate writings present in the mystery book. Through Mason Brown's key, it was determined that 2 sections of the book were notes from books by other authors that Williams had jotted down, one of which was cosmography, and the other was a medical encyclopedia. The 3rd section, consisting of 20 pages, was about the Rhode Island founder's own thoughts regarding a theological issue: infant versus adult baptism. It had been almost 200 years since the mystery had begun, and finally it was solved. The only question that remained was, why did Roger Williams encrypt his annotations? Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads.